So let's talk about sharing. Sometimes you want to share all the ideas in your head with other people, and unless they happen to be within shouting distance, you've got to find some way to get those ideas over to them. People have come up with lots of ways to write down our important thoughts, from clay tablets and papyrus to email and instant messaging. But what do we know about how writing came to be, and all the different ways we can use it to pester our jaws? I'm Moti Lieberman, and this is the Ling Space.
Welcome to the Ling Space.
So writing is important. For most of us, it's a big part of our lives. We use it to have arguments on the internet, plan out recipes, or learn new jokes. But fundamentally, written language is totally weird. It's different from anything else that we do with our words, and we need to be taught how to do it, unlike speaking and listening. If you've watched any of our other videos about phonology, morphology, neurolinguistics, or the rest, you've probably noticed that we don't really talk about writing. That's because linguists usually care about what's going on in your brain, and mental grammars aren't written down. We have a set of principles and parameters in our mind that determines what we can and do say, and those rules don't always correspond to the rules of reading and writing. Essentially, linguistics builds descriptive models of language, the way things really happen, not the rules that you learn at school. And in a lot of cases, writing is prescriptive. It tells you what you should and shouldn't do. Which is great, but that doesn't mean that writing isn't this really fundamental cultural thing that humans figured out how to do at some point. From a historical perspective, you need to know about writing to understand the human story. You need it to chronicle the human story, given that we don't exactly live for thousands of years. The origin of writing is usually traced back to the 3rd millennium BCE, around the end of the Neolithic era. That's also when our ancestors were just figuring out earth-shaking innovations in agriculture, urban planning, religion, and art. Even before that, though, people were expressing their thoughts and feelings by leaving traces on the world around them. The earliest graphic art turns up at least 40,000 years ago, and we find symbolic proto-writing systems about a couple thousand years before full-fledged writing starts showing up. Like the Vinča symbols present on ancient pottery all over the Balkans and southeastern Europe. So writing is this thing that we have an urge to do, although if you think that we invented it to pen epics longer than War and Peace, you're not going to be quite on the mark. Actually, a lot of the records that have survived from the early days of written language are lists and transactions. Which, I mean, makes sense, because that's the kind of thing that you'd want to make official by etching it in stone or pressing it into a clay tablet. But the potential of writing was always greater than just accounting, and people soon wanted a more flexible system, one that could capture a greater range of human experience than remembering how many goats somebody owed you. And that meant a change to how writing systems were used. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can write down your words. English and other European languages use different alphabets to get the job done. Whether you're writing in Portuguese, Russian, Greek, or Armenian, the idea is to have one symbol per consonant or vowel in your language. This is called an alphabet because of the first 2 letters of the Greek system, which are alpha and beta. Well, okay, but maybe you don't want an alphabet. Maybe you want to group your speech sounds together into little bunches and then to pick each of those with one symbol. Now, there's a few different ways you can go about this. If you're a language like Japanese or Inuktitut, maybe you want to stick together your consonants and vowels into pairs and string them together. So take the Japanese word for crab, kani. Now those are 2 syllables, ka, ni, and Japanese represents them with 1 character each. This is called a syllabic writing system, and it's especially convenient for languages that don't have very complex syllables. But imagine what that would be like for a language like English, which allows big consonant clusters even within a single syllable. We would need like 1 billion different characters just to capture all of our monosyllabic words. We have stuff like sick and stick and strict and even sixths, and that's before you even get into words with more than 1 syllable. Another way to group your sounds is to focus on the consonants and just worry about the vowels for later. There are 2 different main ways to do this, and neither of them use alphabets. You could have what's called an abugida instead, so named for the first 4 letters of the Ge'ez script. A lot of the languages of the Indian subcontinent, like Hindi and Bengali, use this kind of system, as do Ethiopic languages like Amharic and Tigrinya. In abugidas, the primary focus of your writing is the consonant, but then the consonant symbols get modified with little vowel-y bits later on. So take a look at the Amharic word for train, babur. Syllables that start with b get this upside-down U shape, and then the b base gets modified to have the a by shortening the left leg, and to have the u by writing this line off the right middle. You can see the same pattern in letters starting with sh, like for sha and shu. The alternative to the abugida is the abjad. Now, if I tell you that one of the major languages that uses this kind of system is Arabic, you can probably guess where that word comes from. That's right, it's the name of the first few letters in that language. Sometimes things do turn up in nice little patterns. So in an abjad, your vowels almost disappear completely. What you get instead are just strings of consonants, and then it's up to the reader to fill in the blanks based on the patterns from the language's vocabulary and grammar. There are extra little symbols to mark for vowels, but texts written for adults pretty much always omit them. So for example, in Hebrew, the word for sword, cherev, has just the 3 consonants, ch, and v, and the vowels are nowhere to be seen. But if you're reading about fighting, you can infer what the vowels should be. But maybe this one sound, one symbol thing doesn't work for you. Maybe you don't want to break things up into segments or syllables. Meanings are way better than sounds. So you want to use the morpheme as the basic unit of writing rather than the phoneme. Well, if you're Chinese or Mayan, you've got a handy logographic system to do that for you. In the Chinese script, each character stands for a particular nugget of meaning. So say you want to write the Chinese word for stairs. The first character, dao, means a floor story, while the second, ti, means a ladder. So stairs, dao ti, are ladders made out of floors. Your ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics would be a logographic system too, although this one was a little bit special because each of the individual symbols could be used as sounds as well. So this was pronounced miu, with a little picture of a cat next to it so that everybody would know exactly what kind of mew we mean. Now of course, logograms exist outside of language too. A lot of road signs and other symbols count as logograms. And if you want, you could think about the emoji and emoticons that we use to season our chats and text like they're a logographic auxiliary writing system. After all, they're a conventionalized system of symbols that we use to communicate, right? Works for me. Another cool thing about writing systems is they can really get around. So the world has a bunch of big language families, and a lot of languages that are related have the same or similar writing systems. And the same goes for cultures that were in contact through commerce, conflict, or colonization. So the English language as we know it derives from ancient Semitic writing systems like Phoenician and Aramaic. The ancient Greeks were the first to make a full-on alphabet though, since the Semitic scripts were usually abjads. But here's the really cool thing. That Greek alphabet became so popular and it got spread around so much of Europe and the Near East that a whole bunch of different alphabets evolved from it. 3 big ones are the Latin alphabet, which we use in English, the Cyrillic alphabet, which gets used in Russian, and the modern Greek alphabet. So the Latin letter D comes from the Greek delta, but so does the letter de in Cyrillic. You get similar stuff with L and S sounds. Another really influential writing system are Chinese characters. These have been around for thousands of years, and they've spread through most of Asia through the influence of Chinese culture. Today, in mainland China, people use a simplified character system while an unsimplified one is still used in Taiwan, for example. And Japanese uses a different simplification for its kanji. Let's take a look at turtle. The traditional Chinese character for turtle is this, and it does kind of look like a turtle. But it also looks really complex, and it is. That character takes 16 strokes to write. In the simplified Japanese form, that's this, which gets it down to 11 strokes, and the simplified Chinese letter is this one, which gets it all the way down to 7. Those are more abstract, but they still do look kind of turtle-y. So we've got lots of ways to write, intricate, varied, and connected, and we've come a long way from record keeping. But whatever system you use, however you encode your sounds, we've got a lot to share. So we've reached the end of the Ling Space for this week. If you took the ladder to the next floor, you learned that writing systems date back about 5,000 years. That people have devised a number of kinds of systems, including alphabets, syllabaries, abugidas, abjads, and logograms, and that just as spoken languages spread and change, written languages do too. The Ling Space is produced by me, Moti Lieberman. It's directed by Delelise Prévost, and it's written by both of us. Our editor is Georges Coulombe, our production assistant is Stéphane Hurtebise, our music and sound design is by Shane Turner, and our graphics team is Atelier Muse. We're down in the comments below. Or you can bring the discussion back over to our website where we'll have some extra material on this topic. Check us out on Tumblr, Twitter, and Facebook, and if you want to keep expanding your own personal Ling Space, please subscribe. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Au revoir!